We have lots to cover in today's video, including lots of trade and free agent speculation as we get deeper into the offseason and closer to the draft and the UFA period. We have talks today about the Carolina Hurricanes and Jake Guentzel. Marty Necas is another topic of conversation. The Calgary Flames and Devils, are they resuming talks on Jacob Markstrom? We have lots of talk around the Vancouver Canucks, Elias Lindholm, the Pittsburgh Penguins, and a few ideas there regarding Riley Smith, Tristan Jarry, and a potential Crosby extension. And do the Montreal Canadiens really want to acquire Trevor Zegras? We now know the asking price. We'll discuss all that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have all kinds of free agent rumors and trade rumors to talk about today. First, we do have one other piece of speculation, which is regarding the potential coaching hire. The New Jersey Devils, of course, we know recently hired Sheldon Keefe to be their new head coach. There is some talk and speculation amongst NHL insiders that Jeremy Colliton may be joining Keefe on his staff as an assistant coach. Of course, we know Jeremy Colliton used to be the head coach of the Chicago Blackhawks. Got started at a very young age. Was most recently the head coach for the American Hockey League team in Abbotsford and the Canucks organization, which we know he recently departed there, which of course created an opening for them to hire Manny Malhotra. So Colliton, of course, we kind of speculated, knew he must feel he had NHL options to look to with resigning his post in AHL Abbotsford. So this is where the expected landing spot is, and it's not confirmed or official at this moment, but that's where the indications are where he's heading. So we'll see how that goes. Lots of talk around the league today regarding some trades and free agent stuff. So let's start first with the Carolina Hurricanes. They've got two big names that are on the market for different reasons. Let's start with Jake Guentzel, who they acquired at the NHL trade deadline. They gave up a pretty good package of picks and prospects to get him. Fortunately for Carolina, they didn't give up their absolute top prospects, but they did give up some ones that I feel do have some strong potential. And the expectation was that Guentzel really liked his time in Carolina. He thought he fit in well. He produced. There was a lot of feelings that he was probably going to end up signing and staying. But as we get closer to free agency, as those talks have begun, not going well. And right now it's believed by Elliotte Friedman that the signing rights are available for trade for Jake Guentzel. So if another team want to talk to his agent, or feel like they have a good opportunity to get a contract done, they want some exclusive negotiating rights before July 1st when he can become on the market, then they can certainly make that happen. It sounds like the Canes are looking for a mid-round draft pick for those signing rights, which is really, it's about as best you ever see teams kind of getting in that sense. But at the end of the day, Guentzel was a great performer for Carolina. We don't know exactly where trade talks or negotiating talks have broken down, but Guentzel can command big money. He's got an impressive resume. Big time playoff performer, numerous 30, 40 goal seasons on his resume. He's still somewhat in the prime of his career. I know the Canes have been one of those teams that they kind of have their values and their numbers, and they just, when they make up their mind that they're only willing to pay a certain price, they don't go above it. It's just that simple. Like I've said it before, you can call them thrifty, you can call them, cheap. I don't know what's the proper word, but there's certainly a reason why nobody in the Canes organization is making huge money. So Guentzel must feel that they're lowballing him, is what it tells me, for him to be at a point where he's not willing to sign. So it's unfortunate. I know the Canes are looking for, they're going to have to go in the market and try to replace him, which is not going to be easy to do at all. Obviously, they fell short in the playoffs as well. Certainly no fault of Jake Guentzel. So we'll see if another team steps up and acquires his rights. There's more talk from Elliotte Friedman today about the Chicago Blackhawks. He really feels that they're going to make a push and they're a legit option for Guentzel. Doesn't mean for sure that Guentzel wants to sign there, but it's a case where Friedman said that they want to make a push to get more competitive and get some veterans to surround Connor Bedard with more talented hockey players, put a better product on the ice, and start kind of coming, rounding the corner, so to speak, out of the rebuild. Not completely out of the rebuild, but, a step forward next year for sure. They probably still need a little bit more time before they can really feel they can challenge for playoffs, but next year is going to be a big step towards getting to that. Maybe in 2 years they can challenge for playoffs. That's probably where things are at with their mindset here around where the organization is at. So we'll see if Chicago ends up making a deal here. Wouldn't be shocking to find out that they are the team, but there's going to be lots of other teams interested as well. Another note on Chicago, GM Kyle Davidson was asked about the possibility of re-signing former Blackhawks star Patrick Kane. Doesn't sound like there's much interest from Chicago to do that. There was some speculation earlier probably 2-3 weeks ago that he could end up going back to Chicago, mainly because he had surgery. He performed really well. We know he may not be able to stay in Detroit, and we know the Blackhawks, like I just said, want to add some good solid veterans to surround Connor Bedard and their other young players to take a step forward next year. Kane could be a valuable asset in that way, but when Davidson answered the question around the possibility of signing Kane, of course he didn't mention him by name, but he did say that they made some really hard, tough decisions on some star players, and he doesn't see them going back on that. So obviously they decided that Kane and Taves were done as Blackhawks. They weren't going to be offered new contracts. Taves ended up, still out there as our UFA. We don't know what Jonathan Taves' future holds as of right now, but we know Kane got traded, ended up in Detroit, and is again looking for a new home. So it doesn't sound like going back to Chicago as much as it was something that was talked about before. Appeared to maybe be an option, but now we can honestly say not so much. Now, talking about the Calgary Flames and Jacob Markstrom, we know he's a top goalie that's going to be on the market this year. He almost was traded at the deadline to New Jersey, and talks are expected to resume and kind of pick up where they left off. We know the Devils and Tom Fitzgerald have their first round pick, the 10th overall selection. Made it perfectly clear publicly in numerous interviews that it's available for trade. Now, Markstrom is not the only goaltender out there. I think they've had, at least to some degree, talks around Linus Ullmark, John Gibson, and maybe others out there, UC Saros to some degree. But honestly, I think the preferred player they really would like is Markstrom. So we'll see. I mean, at the deadline, the obstacle appeared to be the Flames retaining salary. But in all honesty, looking at what kind of package that was rumored to be going back, I don't know why they wouldn't retain salary. To be honest, I know there was even one NHL reporter said that the Devils went back to them afterwards, pretty much just right close to the deadline, and said that they would consider taking him without salary retention. But unfortunately, they couldn't get that figured out. But really, the expectation and the rumor was that it was going to be their 2024 first-round pick, which we now know is 10th overall, along with a defenseman like Seamus Casey, and either Alexander Holtz or Dawson Mercer. One of those forwards had to be included. That's what the Flames were looking for. And we believe the Devils were on board with that because, obviously, they had to go to Markstrom and ask him to waive his no-trade. And he thought he was on the move to New Jersey. So we will see if they revisit that or not. Of course, now Casey is signed, whereas he wasn't at the time. So we'll see. The Flames certainly could get him a great return, but I would think to get this package, it's going to be contingent on them retaining salary. If they don't want to retain salary, and if the Devils going to figure out their cap so they don't need them to, then they're not probably going to get all those pieces. I think they'll get the first round pick and maybe one of those other pieces, but not both. Maybe Holtz probably being the preferred player involved instead of Mercer or Casey. But the Flames probably like Casey or Mercer more, would be my guess. But we will see. Of course, we know those two teams obviously hooked up with a trade last year as well, involving Tyler Toffoli and Sharon Govich. And Sharon Govich worked out quite nicely for the Flames. I'm sure they wouldn't mind repeating that and getting another great addition to their forward group. Can hopefully take a big step forward and become a piece of their younger core to move forward. So we'll see. But those are the trade talks that are, we believe, have kind of picked back up again, but we don't know exactly where things stand. Obviously, right now with the NHL Draft Combine in Buffalo, all the GMs and scouts and lots of NHL people are in the same areas, staying at the same hotels, etc. So lots of conversations are taking place and kind of setting the stage for what will happen later this month. Now in Vancouver, it's believed that they obviously want to sign Zadorov and Lindholm if they can. Going to prove to be challenging for both. It's believed Zadorov's likely looking at a 5 or 6 year term, which is probably the main sticking point for the Flames. It's believed that he's looking for about $4.5 million, 4.75 maybe, something in that range. But I think the bigger sticking point is term. I don't know that Zadorov is looking for an absorbent amount of money based on those numbers and based on how he played last year, especially in the playoffs. I think the Canucks would be okay with his number if it was shorter term. So I think that's kind of the sticking point right now. And from what we heard yesterday from Rick Dollywall and from Dan Milstein, didn't sound promising. But on Elias Lindholm, there is reports out there from Friedman and others that they're willing to go to a 7-year contract at $7 million per year. I know Lindholm, I believe it was, if I'm not mistaken, there was I think it was an Instagram post from his spouse saying that they were leaving Vancouver, and somebody even commented on it and said it was really contract related. So it's not expected right now that they're going to meet his asking price. You got to remember, before he was traded from Calgary to go to Vancouver, he believed to have turned down a contract that was even bigger. So we now know roughly what the Canucks are willing to offer Lindholm. I just don't think it's going to be enough to get it done. I really don't. I think there's going to be other teams out there that are going to offer more, even though his numbers last year were not the best. His playoff performance was really solid, and plus what he's done in Calgary, I think he's going to end up getting at least 8, maybe a little bit better in free agency. So at this point, I would say that 7 times 8, 56 million, 7 times 7, 49 million. It looks like the Canucks are probably about $7 or maybe $8 million off the mark to get a deal done. So I don't have a lot of hope that they're going to be able to sign Lindholm. Maybe Zadorov's, demands on term come down. I don't know, but I think it's fair to say from what we've heard in recent days that the agent wasn't thrilled. But I think Zadorov really liked it there, and I think for once in his career just wants some stability. And I honestly don't blame him. It's just going to be tough to convince a team to give you that type of term for the where he slots in the lineup. So we'll see where things work out in Vancouver. The Penguins also have a variety of things in the hopper here. They are trying to trade Riley Smith, who they picked up last year from Vegas. Fair to say that didn't really work out the best, wasn't a terrific fit. They are looking to move him. He's got 1 year left on his contract. They don't really want to retain salary on Riley Smith's contract, so they would prefer a type of hockey trade. So if they can move Smith for a similar productive, similar age type forward, that might be a better fit for them. That Smith could go somewhere else and hopefully, just do a swap or kind of helps both clubs. That's kind of what they would prefer to do. So we'll see if they can figure that out. Certainly, I don't know if a buyout's completely off the table, but before they even get close to entertaining that, they're going to try to move him, of course. It is believed as well that Tristan Jarry, according to league circles and lots of different executives around the league with knowledge of the situation, claim that Tristan Jarry's not being shopped per se, but he's certainly available. And if the Pittsburgh Penguins could move him and get a top 4 defenseman or a top 6 forward in return, they would very much entertain that thought. Their defense could certainly use work. Of course, we know Letang's dealing with an injury this offseason. You get Carlson still there. Ryan Graves really struggled last year. They don't really see a trade market for Graves, so he likely does return, and they're going to try to work with him to bounce back because he can certainly play better than he did last year. But Jerry is a guy that I think they're regretting on that contract last year. I think it's fair to say Dubas kind of prefers and wishes he hadn't done that, but at this point he has, and they're prepared to go into next year with him if need be. They're not going to move him just for the sake of moving him because then they have to replace him. But if they can find a team that needs a goaltender and will offer something along those lines, then that's going to certainly increase the likelihood that they do get a trade worked out for sure. When it comes to Sidney Crosby, it is believed that as we get closer to the draft, the contract talks are going to pick up with him, and that they should expect an extension done. No guarantee it happens on July 1st or shortly after, but many people feel that it's inevitable that it's going to get worked out, probably somewhere in the 3 times 10 range or something along those lines, and probably won't be too far into July before they get that worked out. Now, as we talked about the Carolina Hurricanes earlier, I know we didn't get into too much with Marty Necas. I know Necas is another player with the Canes that it sounds like they're, at this point, looking to do a trade if they can, but they still really value him, and if they don't find the right deal, they're still going to have those conversations and try to see if they can't figure out signing him and making him happy to stay. However, it is believed that the Carolina Hurricanes, for the conversations they have had around the league, they don't want a future-based package. They don't want like a first-round pick and prospects for Necas. If he is traded, they want like a hockey-type trade where they get a top young player, similar age, similar skill set, coming back. I mean, I don't think it has to absolutely be a forward like him. Could be somebody who can be a real good top four defenseman, because they're certainly going to have a lot of turnover on their D. We don't know who's all coming back, but obviously between Shea and Pesce and Chatfield and D'Angelo, they've got those 4 guys that are all contracts expired, so we don't know how many of those guys are coming back. Burns has 1 more year left. You got Slavin on a little bit more term than that, but this defense could look a fair bit different in 2 and 3 years down the road. So if they can get another top 4D that they find more valuable, better, value-wise contract than what they have possibly on the market that they're looking at re-signing right now, then that might be an option. But at the same time, in the forward group, they would entertain that too. So like a defenseman that comes to mind would be Phil Hronek in Vancouver. If the Canucks have difficulty signing him, then this could be a way for them to bring Necas to Vancouver. We know that there was very much interest from the Canucks management on Necas for sure. We know that prior to the trade deadline, when they were not certain yet if Elias Pettersson was going to sign long-term, they did have trade conversations with the Hurricanes around Pettersson, and Necas was going to be the centerpiece going to Vancouver if indeed they pulled the trigger. They didn't want to do it, obviously. They preferred to sign him, but they had to prepare themselves just in case. And obviously, they had some conversations that went pretty deep on the just-in-case type of scenario, which never came to be. So clearly, at this rate, you're looking at other players around the league. Who could they be looking to? Well, we know that Don Waddell, the former Canes GM who went to Columbus, has rumored to be interested in bringing him over there with them. They want star power. They want a top-producing player in return, more of a hockey deal. What about Patrick Laine? I mean, would Laine be able to thrive with a lot of his, fellow countrymen from Finland on the Canes roster? I mean, he's played with a lot of these guys in his home country as well as internationally. I was wondered if Laine got reconnected with a guy like Sebastian Aho, if that might be a huge help to his career. He did have a shoulder procedure. He was confirmed by Don Waddell because there was a picture circulating a few weeks ago of Laine with a bandaged shoulder. Waddell referred to it as a cleaning up kind of procedure, so it doesn't sound overly serious and sounds like he'd definitely be ready to go for training camp. But outside of a guy like Laine or Hronek, it's tough to peg exactly how this could work. I talked yesterday about the possibility of the Hurricanes upgrading their goaltending and going for a guy like Linus Ullmark out of Boston, and there is belief that there is some interest in that. But again, will Ullmark go to the Bruins, or some of these younger guys don't necessarily have the trade protection that the more experienced players do? So we'll see. Necas is most likely going to be dealt and will probably be one of the top names leading to the draft or at the draft that gets traded. But obviously, they want a star power coming back, star power young player. So it's going to end up being a hockey move that could be quite interesting for both sides. Now, speaking of a trade that could be interesting for both sides, we've heard a lot about Trevor Zegras and his connections to the Montreal Canadiens. Well, we finally have a better idea from an NHL reporter on what that asking price could be. Yesterday, I talked about the fact that Zegras has been linked to other teams besides Montreal. They seem to get all the attention, probably because they have such a large fan base and obviously one of the original 6 teams. But at the same time, we mentioned that there was some other teams that were interested in Zegras, including one of Montreal's rivals in Ottawa. But at the same time, I don't know that interest is super high, but there was some degree of interest, and there was some belief that some talks did take place with those teams. But when it comes to Montreal, certainly a little bit more of a serious interest and more conversations have taken place. But according to Arpon Basu of The Athletic, he says that the asking price from Zegras, which we talked about, that was going to be high and might be doubtful that Kent Hughes wants to meet it, is they want one of the Habs' top young defensemen. And we know that they have lots of them, but we're not talking about just any of them. They want Caden Gooley or David Reinbacher. So that would be the asking price for Zegras. Now, I'm surprised that you didn't get Lane Hudson's name brought up, or even the 5th overall pick. But at this rate, I mean, Montreal has lots of D, sure. But are they, as good as those guys. A lot of them would not be. Goulet's looking really solid so far. If I absolutely had to trade one of these guys between Goulet and Reinbacher, I would pick Reinbacher just because I know more about Caden Goulet. He's got more NHL experience right now. He's further along in his development, and you have a better idea what you have. Whereas Reinbacher is still young enough, new enough, unestablished, like lack of establishment so far, that you can't say 100% what he's going to be in the NHL. Yes, does he look like a real solid prospect that could be a real good top 4 defenseman? He sure does, but it doesn't always mean they're going to work out that way. Lots of prospects don't work out. It's just that simple. So if I had to pick, I would pick, keeping Goulet, but that's just me. But at the same time, I can understand why Pat Verbeek would have such a, what we'd call a high price tag. And he figures if Montreal really wants him, that's what he's going to get from him. I don't know if he has preference on the defense, one over the other, but, Reinbacher's a right shot D. A lot of people thought when Montreal drafted him that maybe he went a little bit too high, and we'll see if that ends up being the case or not. He will certainly be getting more action at the pro level in North America next year, so we'll have a better indication of where things are at with his development. But it does make you wonder, should they pull off that kind of move? To me, like I said, I don't know. It's iffy for sure. I know between their defensemen, you're looking at typically guys like, Struble and Harris and Kovacevic and to some degree David Savard. Those would be, or even Barron. They would be the more likely defensemen that they would consider moving, more so than guys like Goulet or Lane Hudson or David Reinbacher or Arbor Xhekaj. But if you really value this player and you really think Trevor Zegras is going to be a real major upgrade in your top 6 and is going to put up tons of points playing with his old buddy Cole Caulfield, then maybe you take a chance and you do it. So if you're a Habs fan especially, I'd like to know, because I've seen lots of interest in Zegras, lots of speculation about the cost. Now we have a better idea what it's going to be. If you had to trade David Reinbacher to get Trevor Zegras, do you do that deal? I don't know. I mean, I can see why the Ducks would do it. But at the same time, I'm not sure I completely agree with the Ducks' opinion on Zegras either. So it's tough call for sure. They're very different types of players, and it really boils down to how much confidence you have in Zegras as a difference maker in your top 6. So let me know what you think down in the comments, and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.